The holiday season is coming fast, and if you want to be ready, it's better to start prepping earlier than too late. Today's recipe is really special because it can be made in advance and it will stay fresh and delicious until the holidays come caroling at your door. Compared to most other people, you will be ready because you have watched all of my tutorials and made most of the bacon, hams, and other delicious cured meat recipes that I've shared with you. But this is a particularly special deli meat because it will enhance any dish you add it to, from stews to sandwiches and everything in between. Before we continue, I would like to thank the sponsor of today's video, Elemental Ashes. In this great online shop you can find unique, handmade serving boards made out of food-safe reclaimed wood that are perfect for serving pizza and charcuterie boards, picnics, fruit and veggie boards enjoyed on a beautiful autumn day, and at many other friends and family gatherings where aesthetically pleasing and delicious foods are served. At the same time, if you're a photographer or a videographer, then these boards can be a fantastic prop that will make your own art pop and stand out. Thanks again to Elemental Ashes for sponsoring today's video, and now let's get back to the recipe. These are the ingredients you will need for this recipe. 3 kilos or 6.6 pounds of pork shoulder. Then for the brine you will need 4 tablespoons of rock salt or sea salt, 1 tablespoon of black peppercorns, 2 bay leaves, 1 tablespoon of dry rosemary, and 5 garlic cloves peeled. Lastly, for the coating you will need the following: 1 tablespoon of sweet paprika, 1 tablespoon of ground black pepper, 1 tablespoon of hot smoked paprika, 1 tablespoon of dry thyme, 1 tablespoon of ground coriander, 1 tablespoon of ground allspice, 1 tablespoon of salt, 1 head of garlic, and 50 milliliters of oil. At the same time, these are the tools you'll need for this recipe. A proper food steamer would be ideal, but if like me you don't have one, I will show you in this video how to make a DIY steamer from scratch with just a large pot with a lid, some aluminium foil, and a couple of wooden spoon or wooden dowels. Apart from that, you will need the following: a garlic press, a couple of wooden skewers, a thermal probe, a sharp knife and a chopping board, a wire rack, and a couple of paper towels. Lastly, if you decide to follow along and smoke the meat, you will need butcher twine or food-grade meat netting and a pair of scissors. Also, if you're making your own meat products, one of these hog ring pliers is very useful to have, but not necessary, because if you're new to this or occasionally curing meat, butcher twine will work just fine to tie up the ends. Next, we'll start the prep by shaping the meat into usable chunks. This process is relatively easy due to the fact that we're using pork shoulder. The choice of meat is strategic due to the low cost and because, as you can see, by following the connective tissue and cutting alongside it, we can take out very pretty and whole pieces without too much trouble. While here, remove any bits and pieces of fat and connective tissue, but keep them safe because they can be used in soups, stews, or casseroles, giving them a considerable flavor boost. When you're done portioning and cleaning the meat, grab the skewer or the thermal probe if it has a pointed thick tip, and start poking the meat pieces in as many places as possible, making sure not to impale yourself in the process. This is an essential step that will help us in the brining process and yield us a superior final product. And speaking about brining, once the meat is properly poked, add it to a large pot, sprinkle the brining mix we prepared before, and squeeze the garlic through the press on top of it. Lastly, add enough water to cover the meat, mix well to ensure the salt is properly melted, cover it with the lid and put it into the fridge where it will stay for 3 days or 72 hours. When this time has passed, take the meat out from the brine and rest it on the wire rack. This will remove most of the moisture and make our life easier later. In about 10 minutes you can put the meat in the cotton netting or wrap it in butcher twine. I am using the netting, but you can use the infinite amount of butcher twine tutorials out there as a source of inspiration. And to clarify, I use both methods based on the meat cut and or recipe that I'm preparing. Whatever method you are using, just make sure that the ends are secured and adequately closed, because the last thing we want is for the meat to fall in the smokehouse or in the steamer. When you're done, while still on the wire rack, place the meat in the fridge or a cold pantry root cellar for a day. Before we smoke the meat, it must dry out or the smoke won't stick to it. Now for the smoking. I've seen people smoke meat in a soup pot, an oven, a tabletop special smoking gizmo, and even, like my dad, a DIY smoker made out of a 200-liter metal drum. I can't speak about any of those because I've never used them. I'm a bit more old-fashioned, so I built myself a wooden smokehouse from reclaimed pallet wood, and after 4 years of use, it still stands tall and proud and never disappoints. Initially attached to it, I had a tiny burning chamber made out of an old feta cheese drum. That being said, soon after I attached the smokehouse to my outdoor kitchen stove using some creative chimney pipe configuration so that whenever I cook on it, I can smoke meat at the same time and use the same amount of wood. The system works because it has a splitter. When I don't need to smoke meat, the chimney sends all the smoke up, and when I do, it diverts the smoke to the smokehouse. At the same time, the wood we smoke with is crucial for the flavor of the finished product. Whenever I smoke meat, I primarily use fruit tree wood because it does a great job, and I have ample amounts of it from the prunings of my orchard that I do every spring. This gives the meat a very sweet and pleasant aroma. Oak and beech would also work good, but I don't have access to them. As for the smoking itself, I do 3-hour segments for most of the meats. More than that and it's overkill, both in wood use, taste profile, and time invested. The only dishes I smoke for more than 3 hours are bacon and head cheese. I'll cover why in their own designated videos. Pork, beef, poultry and fish will be done and perfect with a 3-hour intensive smoke session. By that I mean you stay next to the fire and keep it going, producing as much smoke as possible. Soaking the wood the day before in a bucket of water greatly helps with this stage. And a bonus tip here, because if you are a smoked meat enthusiast like myself, basic smoking won't do it anymore. So start saving walnut shells, pistachio shells and Kalamata olive pits. The next time you're smoking some of your most favorite meats, drop some pre-soaked shells into the stove during the last hour of smoking. Trust me, you won't regret it. Honestly, if you're as obsessed with smoked meats as I am, please share in the comments some of the weird woods and shells you use to make your meat stand out. Once the meat is smoked, it's time to steam it. And if you have a proper food steamer, then once the steamer is at temperature, steam the meat for 20 minutes or until the core temperature of each piece of meat reaches a minimum of 72 Celsius, though 75 would be ideal. If you don't have a food steamer, then let's DIY one together. Remember those tools from the beginning? Okay, so in the large pot, add about a liter of water or 4 fingers, depending on the shape and size of your pot. Then use the wooden spoon and skewers to suspend the pieces of meat over the water, making sure the meat is not submerged. We want to steam, not boil it, as boiling would remove the majority of flavor and aroma from the meat. When you're done, make a lid for the pot from aluminum foil so that most of the steam created won't escape, as airtight as possible. It's kinda like a sauna but without all the sweaty people. Then place the pot on the stove, and once the steam begins to rise, start a 20-minute timer. Then the same rules apply as I mentioned before while talking about using a dedicated food steamer. At the 20-minute mark, prop the meat, and if it's 72 Celsius or above, then it's done. If not, leave it in for 5 more minutes and check if you still have enough water left in the pot. In the meantime, while the meat finishes steaming, add the seasoning we prepared at the beginning and 50 ml of oil into a large pot or bowl and mix everything together until fully incorporated. Now comes the fun part. When the meat is done, take it out on the wire rack and remove the butcher twine or the netting. Then, while still piping hot, Coat each piece of meat in the spice mix so that the flavors and aroma can penetrate each pore of the shoulder pieces. Use a pair of tongs so that you don't scald yourself. And we're done. All that's left is to let it cool down and the spice mix to dry on it. Depending on how well ventilated your house is, it may take between 6 to 12 hours. This is one of my favorite recipes because, if you think about it, it's a whole journey, an adventure to get from a raw chunk of meat to something truly special that you can slice into and nourish your family with. The choice of meat, the spices, the brining and the smoking, each stage has its own charm and contributes to the final product. I won't tell you how to eat it. You've worked too hard for me to rob you of this pleasure and mansplain things. However, if you decide to make it, know that you have my full respect and admiration for taking on this challenge and seeing it through. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel, and if you like what I do and love what you see, please consider supporting me by visiting our sponsor shop called Elemental Ashes and see if anything you see there speaks to your heart. Thank you very much for your time and interest, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye. Very smoky.